Hi, everybody. Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to go ahead and take what we learned from the anatomy of an HTML page and apply the elements to a somewhat complex layout. It's simple, it's an address, but it's somewhat complex because to make it look good, you've got to be able to size things and have them go flow across the page like that and also be responsive. So you could, when you resize things, they kind of um, size to phone size. So even if I slide it all the way over, you see how this nicely laid itself out so that we can see all the fields. And then when we stretch it back out, it stretches out nicely again. All right, so we're going to go ahead and build one of these from scratch. I've done this a long time ago, haven't done it recently, so we're going to learn together again. I'll be learning it again. We're going to start from what we learned before. So we're just going to put elements on the page, see that it looks kind of ugly, and then we're going to make it look better like this. We're going to modify this, though. We're probably not going to put email and password. This is like combining login and address or something like that. So we're going to do a simple address, probably first name, last name, and then the address or something like that. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so last time you probably remember that we did input elements. So these are all inputs for the most part. I think every single one of them is, even this checkbox, and probably this button too. It could be a button, it could be an input of type button, but it's an input, I believe, in all of these. So let's go ahead and start making one of those with our editor. So where was our editor? All right, so where we left off is we had one of these things. So let's go ahead and use that form template again. Oh, okay, this was our file upload thing. So that was where we left off. All right, so I'm just going to clear that form out. And let's go ahead and start simple. We want, let's do the street address first. We could add name and all that other stuff later. So let's do an input. And we want type equals text. And you remember that from the last lesson, and you were probably playing around with it a little bit. So let's call it address for the ID, and let's also call it name for the name. The name attribute here is when this form gets posted, it's going to send this label with the value that's in here. So that's how that works. So you have a name. ID is used for JavaScript to easily identify it. That's easier to get to. And then name is what actually gets posted to the server. So we want to have that. So let's just run this and see what we get. Let's see, do we have a browser open to that? Nope. All right, so let's just do a right click. And what do we do here? Open in HTML. All right, so yeah, that's definitely ugly. All right, so but that's an address. So let's go ahead and leave it there. All right, so address, let's actually call it street address because address is actually the whole thing. And underscore that's something I'm doing right now for these attributes. Probably for readability, you could mix the case like this. That's good for JavaScript and Java. That's typically how they do variables. I kind of like to be able to read it a little bit easier like that when it's an ID of a HTML element or the name. So I do it this way. All right, so we've got street address. Probably going to have street address 2, right, in case there's a PO box. So let's just put a 2 here and a 2 there. That's usually what they call it. All right, and then we need a city. And you'll notice something really quickly once we get this done. We're just going to do these right now. State and zip code, right? We'll just call it zip. Okay, so let's go ahead and refresh our browser. All right, they go all the way across. And they have no labels. So let's put some labels on them. All right, so remember how we did this label thing before, right? It's label, and then for equals, and this one's going to be street address. And we want it to be street address. Okay, let's see what that looks like. Okay, it's right there. Let's do another one. So label for street address 2, and let's just call it street address 2. And what does that look like? Okay, you can see they're all going across. So already it's really looking ugly and getting uglier by the minute. All right, so let's go ahead and put more labels on these so we know what they are. This one is city. Okay, and then we're going to do one for state and zip. All right, so this one's state. And remember, making the label means we can one gives us a label so we can see what we're working with, and two, if you click on the label, it'll give focus to that component or that element. What's this one? Zip. And let's just call it zip code because that's really the official name, and I think it's one word like that. And so if that's the case, we want to try and be consistent. Otherwise, you have to remember, okay, did I call it zip or did I call it zip code? If you're just consistent, then you don't have to think about it. You can just say, okay, I always spell out a whole thing out. Okay, so what does that look like? Even uglier. It's functional, right? We could type in it, but then it does that. It gets even worse if you stretch it. Okay, so let's make it look a little bit better. If we do this, we'll wrap each one of these in a div. So a div's a container from what we learned before. And we'll do that. And let's indent this inside of here. And let's see if that actually gave us separation. So a div is a container, and by default, it actually flows top to bottom, right? Whereas labels and inputs obviously are going horizontally because that's what it looks like on the form layout. So let's go ahead and see if our div helped us. It did. It did. Look at that. So it did it on a new line. All right, so let's go ahead and wrap all of them in divs. So each section, we've got a label and an input. So we're just going to wrap them in a div. And this will be important, and you'll see why in a little bit. Let's give some indentation so we could see it. It makes it more readable. And then I'm going to put a little bit of space. It's helping me. So I think it thinks I'm going to be typing this top down like I know what I'm doing. And I kind of do, but I don't always know exactly what I'm going to do right away. So it is helpful sometimes, but not right now. So at least I could cut and paste it down below. Okay, so I think this is the last one. Okay, indentation's off there. All right, so now we have them flowing like that. Okay, but it's still kind of messy. But it's okay, it's functional. Let's add a button. Let's do input. So we'll do an input and we'll call it type button. And we'll give it doesn't, see now on a button it doesn't really need a name. And usually it's type submit. Because this is going to actually, if they click this, it's going to submit the form. So we're going to do that. And then let's take the value, which is going to be the label in this case. And it's what would get sent to the server if we actually gave this a name. And let's call this save. All right, what's it look like? All right, now we've got a save button. Notice how it's functional, but doesn't do much. Now, if I click on this, what does it do? Okay, it does what we saw in the previous lesson, is it does a get because we haven't told it to do anything yet, or I think we actually told it to do get with a blank action, which means it doesn't know where to go. All right, so if we did have values in there like this, you'll see that it puts the value there. So this is what this will do is it'll call a get to the server on index.html, pass this stuff in. Server would intercept the call, look at the parameters, and then do something with this address. We don't do it that way anymore, and that was probably back in the old days in the late 90s where it was doing something like that. We don't do that anymore. So let's go ahead and make this. This is a front end course. We'll do some JavaScript later on to post this form, but let's let it do this for now. We're about to make this look better because it really doesn't look good. Now, one of the popular libraries and tools out there, frameworks, would you call it? CSS framework, maybe they call them. We'll find out. But it's Bootstrap. So Bootstrap is one that's very popular, and you can see how it's got the layout here, which looks way better than what we have right now. All right, so what is Bootstrap anyway? Let's go to here. Responsive site with Bootstrap. I don't know what it's actually called. I'm calling it a framework. It doesn't really say what it is on their page. Yeah, it's a CSS. It's a set of tools for CSS that helps us actually lay out our pages nicely. All right, so what we're going to do then is go to get started because we need to add Bootstrap to our page. So Bootstrap is CSS. Um, and what it does is it helps us lay out our pages, and it does a lot of default stuff for us that makes it really easy to work with. So we're working with CSS, but there's a lot of built-in things into Bootstrap that makes the page look better automatically without us even doing anything. And we're going to see that in a minute. Okay, so CSS on part of it, and there's also JavaScript things that it does too. So it does both, and it does layout and everything else. So that's going to make it look nice. All right, so getting started. The quick start tells us a couple things to do. So I'm going to look for a template because usually it has some kind of get started. Yeah, there it is. There's a starter template right there. Here it's telling us we can add a link to the CSS, which we could easily just do by copying and pasting it into our head of our HTML page. And we might want to do that. And then there's this JavaScript part of it that manages a lot of things for us JavaScript-wise. So we would put that in there too. And then separate. If you decide to go a separate script solution, popper must come first. I don't know what that means. It's just a way of doing it. So we can do them separate. So this must be the bundle of zip stuff, or the bundle of Bootstrap, which includes popper for the tooltips and popovers, which is nice, right? So that this download will get us all of that. And then if we wanted to do them separate with popper coming out and then the Bootstrap JavaScript, we could copy it there. Also in a starter template. So remember, we have an HTML template that we kind of made, but this is a nice starter template here. So you see this, how it's got the HTML already laid out with the doc type and everything and the head. It's got this nice sort of character set, so it tells the browser how to render it. It tells the viewport what scale to operate with and the device width. So that's nice too. That's something you want to do. And then it's got the CSS in there. It's got a title, kind of like we have. It's got an H1, which we played with before. And then here's where we get to pick the JavaScript. This is the bundle, and then if we want to pick this. So I actually think we should go with this template, and we're going to copy it, and we're going to paste it in, but we're not going to replace our stuff because we've already actually done some work here. So we have very, very similar things. They have more, which includes the Bootstrap stuff. So I'm just going to make room. All right, so now we've got their form in here, and that's, I don't even know what that's going to do. You shouldn't have both things. Let's just see what it does just for fun because we're learning here. If we refresh that, okay, it looks better or bigger anyway already, but that's just because the CSS is on there. Let's go ahead and clean that up a little bit. So we have our form action in our body. So we're going to take that out and we're just going to cut it. It's Command X on my machine. If you're on Windows, it's Control X. And then this is what our actual template looks like. So not much there, very bare bones. So let's go ahead and delete that. Okay, so here's the body of theirs. So choose one of two. That's a comment that's telling us what to do for instructions. We're going to go ahead and go with the bundle, and we don't want to do them separate, so that cleaned that up. All right, so now let's run that. Now remember, in our paste buffer, we don't want to lose it because we've got some code in there that we want to keep. Let's do a refresh, and we've got hello world, so the page is still working. Come back here, and let's go ahead and paste right there. All right, so now we've got a form under hello world. And this gives some vertical space so we can read it a little bit better. All right, let's see. We don't want two blank lines. And here we go. All right, it looks a little bit better just because it's bigger and the font's changed a little bit. Now what we want to do is some Bootstrap stuff to make it look good. All right, so if we go back to Bootstrap, and I'm not going to teach you from my memory. I'm going to teach you from having to look stuff up because when you're done with this course, or any course really, you have to do all this stuff on your own. And you can refer back to the course, but it's better if you know how to do it and know how to look it up. I still do that. I don't keep this stuff in my memory. I come here and I cut and paste it, or I come here and I look, okay, what did they do before? I don't remember. And then I do that. So part of this course is not just to teach you how to do HTML, it's to teach you how to figure out how to do HTML. There's so many resources out there. No sense keeping it in your head. There's so much to know. And you don't use it all the time. So it's good to know how to get to it. All right, so what are we trying to do again? We're trying to make this look better. All right, so let's go to their Bootstrap. Now, looking for that form. I don't remember where that was. I can use my back button, but let's go ahead and figure out where that could be just by looking. So there's a lot of things in Bootstrap, as you can see. Just getting started is this big. And it's really not that complicated. What we just did was the hardest part, is figuring out how to get it onto our page, and they tell us exactly what to do. The next hardest thing is layout, and that's where we're going to have most of our learning happen. Now, breakpoints, this is important. We're going to actually, it's part of the sizing, so we'll learn this in a second. So these will make sense in a little bit. This is for the device type and the dimensions. So big screens, a little bit smaller, and then small, tiny screens, usually phones, older phones. Okay, so forms. Do we think this thing could be in forms? Could be. Now, forms, and I want you to go to Bootstrap and just look at their examples, just kind of get familiar with what these things are, and just scroll through it. You don't have to learn it. You don't have to read it right now. Just know where it is. No, you don't have to memorize where it is either. Just know that it's here so that you can be familiar with what you're going to be looking for. All right, so I'm just scrolling down here, and these are just form controls, and it explains here how to use the form controls with inputs. And one of the key things here is this class. Now, this is a CSS class, and Bootstrap uses form control, and so as soon as we put form control on something, it makes it look a lot better. And then here's another one, form label. So let's just do that for now. Okay, and then we need to do some sizing here. Okay, so let's figure out this on this first example. So we've got a top bottom thing here. I'd really like to find the address though, and I don't think address is here. Maybe it's on here in layout. So, because address is layout challenging type thing. Yep, there it is. And that's actually the example we had up. So notice, now this is label at the top, text box underneath it. This is where the challenge is right here. But Bootstrap makes this easy, and then you'll be doing this in minutes. There's no sense trying to figure out everything else that it does right now. You can figure that out later, and we'll probably have a course on how to lay things out manually, although I don't know why we would do that right now when we have this nice tool. Okay, so notice what they're doing here. They've got this class, and it's got a row. So a row is something that flows vertically. A G3, I have no idea what G3 is. I believe G is gutter. And we can find that out somewhere else. Gutter. So by adding the gutter modifier, you can have control over the gutter width in as well as the inline block direction. Okay, so let's go ahead and add this to our div. We're going to make a container div. So notice how they've got a div around their inputs here. We're going to go ahead and put a div. We already have that div. We're going to put one around the whole thing here. So right here, we're going to put a div. And that's going to finish it for me. So I'm going to go to the bottom here after the input and put the close div there. Okay, and then I'm going to highlight these and indent them so we can read it. Oh, not all of them. Okay, try that again. Okay, tab to indent. Okay, now it's indented. We've got a div. Now we want to paste in that row 3. Oh, we need to put the CSS class in there like that. Okay, let's see what that does. I don't know what it's going to do. Okay, so it did that. Not exactly what we want yet. Okay, so there's something else to this. Now, Bootstrap uses containers to get things nicely centered. Notice how this page is nicely centered here, right? So they use containers. And are they going to give us an example of this? They probably do, where this whole thing starts, probably here. Now, this layout section is something that you want to focus on because this is where all of the layout stuff happens. So if you learn this section pretty good, you're well on your way to having nice looking pages. Now, breakpoints, that's where, like we mentioned, how things fit on certain devices. And that's pretty straightforward. You just need these little things here for a small, medium, and large, and extra large. So containers, now this is how you set things into the middle. Now containers, for small, does this. So notice the sizing. of what it does. So extra small is just going to do 100% because it's a small, probably phone. It's just going to fill the space. Now, if you use small, medium, large, and extra, extra large, that's how big it's going to be until it starts to break and go to the next one. Okay, so the default container, this is what we want to set everything where we want it. So it's a container div that goes around everything, and you just give it class container, and it'll make stuff look nicer automatically. So we've got this for our row, and let's go ahead, that's what they had. So let's go ahead and add another div here, and we'll do CSS class container. And we're going to put that down below here. So now we've wrapped this whole thing in a div. And then we're going to indent everything properly so we can see what's going on. Okay, let's see what that does. And notice how we're just experimenting because we're learning. Okay, so it moved everything over. So we probably want our title in there too. And Hello World's probably not the right title, but that's okay for now. So we probably want our container a lot higher, is what that's telling me. So we want it there. Now we had it in our form, which is not where we want it now. So I'm going to cut it, and we want it outside the form like that. And then we can move the form over one to indent it. We actually need to move all of this over one because we want to know what's contained inside of what. Okay, so now we can neatly see that there's the div right there for the container. So now if we refresh the page, okay, that looks better. This thing's going all the way across the page. I don't know why yet. All right, so now let's see what we can do next. In their example, so that's container, so that's giving us, notice what that did give us though. Everything was smashed to the side. Now it's all nicely centered. So if I resize the browser, it's doing that. See how it's pulling it to the center? Okay, so that's good. All right, so now let's try and make this look even better. Well, not that that looks great yet. Okay, so we've got columns and gutters. So columns, and we're going to see this in their example, but so containers are the wrapper that sets the size. You can do fluid where it does 100% width and it just kind of smoothly flows. Regular container, snap, snap, snap. And then I think breakpoint's the same. Oh, breakpoint is dash breakpoint, so you get to say what breakpoint you want. Not as important. Let's just stick with container right now to keep things simple. Grid, this is important. Now the grid goes across in columns like this. And so by fitting these columns, you'll notice how it split them in 3 because it knew. So this explains how it works. And it's basically grid. Hopefully they have a nice grid example down here. Okay, here we go. This is a good one. So adding just 2 columns to this div row. So here's a row and here's 2 columns inside of the row. Think of an Excel spreadsheet or a table, right? So you've got rows and then you've got columns within the rows. Just by adding 2, it neatly divided it in half. As soon as we put 3 in there, it divided it into thirds. So that's how that works. So setting 1 column width, right? So we're going to set this one wider. So we've got 3 in there. And so the grid is set up as 12, right? So you got 12 across. So in this case, they've got this one set to 6. So that's a 6. So these 2 must be 6 total, right, to make 12. So that's a 3 and a 3. And that's how we get to it. So it's always going 12 across. Now, if you put another row inside of here, it would start another 12 inside of this. Okay, so that's how that works. So it's 12 across the whole main container, but if you put more containers in and more columns and rows, you're going to get 12 inside of that. So it's 12 and then 12 and 12. It keeps sizing down as we go. All right, so then we could also do variable width. If we do auto, it's going to automatically size this thing in the middle. Same thing here with that one. We've got an auto and then a large 2, and then this one's going to be flexible. All right, so you see how they all work. And that's basically the gist of it. Just remember it's 12. So the row needs to equal 12, or it's going to make itself equal 12 no matter what. Even if you just don't specify what the number is, it's going to automatically figure it out by what's in there. And so these are the examples. And this is probably the most important thing in here that I can think of. But once you get it, just know it's 12, divide by 12, or divide into 12 by the number of columns you have, and you'll be okay. And then you could set things like that. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. And that's probably the most difficult thing to get used to. And once you learn it, you're done and you just start using it. All right, so let's experiment a little bit. Back to our layout in forms. They're going to tell us how to lay this out with the address. You can see what they're doing here. So here's one that's 6. So this one's going to go across for 6, and that's the email. So we're going to skip that one. That's the password. But you already know what's going on here because you've seen it. There's a 6 here, a 6 there. So what's going to happen is it's going to split up 6 and 6. It's going to go straight across. And then the next one says 12, so that's going to take up the whole row. Another 12 is going to take up the whole row. So let's go ahead and set our call 12 on, okay, this is a row. So we want to do this. So we're going to do, remember, it was class equals form control, right? Actually, we're in the div yet. We're not in form control yet. So we are setting our div. Sorry about that. We're just setting this to call. And are they using mid or are they using, they're using mid. So mid's probably the middle device so that it works nicely on most things. So if we did mid and let's set it to 12, that'll go all the way across. Let's see. And it's already probably going all the way across just because that's the default. No, it's not. So if I refresh the page, still not looking good because of something, not sure yet. We'll figure it out in a minute. Oh, that's because it's a 12. It's probably doing it if we do this. Here, watch. Let's go ahead and open up our inspector. All right, so if we do this, we should see it's going all the way across just like it says it's going to. And in fact, they all are because they're divs. By default, divs go all the way across. Okay, so now let's go ahead and put our other things here, which will take advantage of Bootstrap because right now only some of the default behavior is being taken advantage of. So this was called label. I don't remember what it was called. Form label. Okay, so let's go back here and call this one form label, and that's the class. So it's the CSS class in Bootstrap, form label. And does that change anything yet? Not really. All right, and so what else did they do over here? So just form label, and then let's do form control right here and see what it does. Oh, not there. Here. All right, and then we're going to do class. Let's put it right here. Doesn't really matter the order of the attributes. Sometimes you want to be consistent, though, so you know where you're looking. This one's form control. Now does it do anything? Now you see that it actually goes across the full width of the page at this point. Okay, so let's do that with the others, and you'll see that it's going to look a lot better already. Just doing this simple thing is going to make it look better, because now by adding the class for the Bootstrap class that actually formats things nicely, it'll start looking better almost immediately. Okay, I called the label form control, but it's actually form label. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing here. And then form control here. Okay, another one. We're going to only have a couple left. Form label. And then this one is, oops, you got to spell it right, otherwise it won't see it too. All right, class equals form control on this one. One more. Okay, and this one is class. So it's CSS class, it's class for short. Form label. And then class equals form control. And this is pretty much all you do. You're setting form control you're setting container widths, and you'll see that we're going to set some widths in there to get the sizing for the city, state, zip, right? That's the most complex part in here. And this is pretty much all you do. There's some other things you do, but you don't really do them very often. This is the main thing to know. And you can learn it in minutes, and that's what we're going to do right here. All right, so let's see what it looks like now. Probably want to do something with our button. Okay, now it's laying out a little bit better, and it's already looking better, and now it's already responsive. All right, now we want to do something a little bit more challenging, and that's get the city, state, and zip going the right way. And this button, I don't know why it's so huge. We'll have to fix that too. Okay, so these are our things that we want to change here. So let's do this. Let's put them in a div on their own. First, let's look and see what they did. What did they do? Oh, they're just setting the width, right? So they're saying 12 on each one, and then they don't even put rows in. I was going to actually put a container row, but they found a way to just, it's going to do what's called floating, I believe is what they're using. And it's just going to float at 6, and then it's going to float at 4, and then float at 2. Notice that that equals 12. So it's going to go across for 12. All right, so let's go ahead and do that too. So they have call mid 6 on the div that they have right there. So let's do that. So it's CSS class, column, mid 6. All right, let's see what that even looks like when we refresh. Nothing yet. Well, actually, you see it sized it down to 6, right? But it didn't change much, although it did set the sizing. All right, so what do you think is going to happen here when we set this one to call mid? And what is the state? It's probably going to be smaller. What did they set it to? They did 4. That's what I thought. All right, so we're going to do 4 also. All right, let's see what happens. What I'm expecting is that this is 6, remember 12 across. So when we set this one smaller than the default, which is 12, it should be able to say, okay, that's 6, I've got room here, so I'm going to put my 4 right next to it. Let's see if it actually does that. Refresh the page, and that's exactly what it did. All right, so now we've got a 6, a 4, we've got 2 left here. And if we set this one to 2, so call mid 2. And what we're expecting to happen is zip code is going to come right here because there's a 6, there's a 4, and then there's going to be a 2. Ready? Here we go. There it is. So address is probably the most complex layout as far as form controls go, just because you're laying these things out. Now there's some nice, really nice examples in Bootstrap that you're going to want to look at. Let's fix the save button. Now, do they have a save button in their example? They probably don't. Oh, they do. Oh, and they're using a button type submit. So maybe we should do that. But notice that they're doing that. Does their button go across the page? No, their button goes like that. So let's change ours to button, and then let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to wrap it in a div. And we're going to set, we can just get rid of that. We're just going to set it to class. Did they set it to 12? Yeah, they did. All right, so class equals call, and we want this one to go all the way across. Remember, 12 is the all the way across because it's 12 across is the value. And we're going to do a button type submit. And the button is going to be sign in. Now we don't want sign in, we're saving our address. Okay, we're just going to do save, and then let's refresh our page and see what it looks like. All right, the button's over there, but notice it doesn't look very bootstrappy, right? Bootstrap has this nice, where is it? That blue button. How did they do that? Do you suppose they did this? They have a Bootstrap class for button, and that's going to make that look nice. So let's just do the button first and see what happens if we just change and add that one class. So let's go ahead and add this and refresh our page and see what that button changes into. So here it is, kind of old style, and now it looks like that. So it's a save link. All right, so then let's go back here, and they had button primary, I believe is what they had. And there's different kinds of button primaries, and you'll see what this does. This one's primary, and then there's others, danger, warning. So let's see what this does. So button primary. So btn primary. All right, so now what happens when we save it? Okay, now it looks like theirs. And that is pretty much it. Let's go ahead and add our name, because we're pretending this is an address book. So let's go ahead and add two things. And notice I'm taking from what we already have. So this is call mid 12. We want to split this up. So let's call this one first name. Not a dot. And leave that alone. And we'll just say first name here. And it's first underscore name. Oh, same here. So we're just going to copy and paste. All right, and then we've got this street address here, so let's call it last name on this one. So label for last name. And then we're going to put this one last name. All right, so that's our label, and then let's set our ID to last name and our name to last name. Now remember, name's the one that gets sent to the server, and it's last name. Okay, so we need, this is set to 12, so let's go ahead and set it to 6. We want first name, and then we want last name on the same line. So we're going to add the CSS class here, and it's going to split, we want to split the line in half. So it's 12 across, so we're going to make it mid and then 6. And what we expect here is a first name and a last name to go across. So if we refresh, there it is, first name, last name, street address 2, city, state, zip code. And if we size it, see it's looking good. Okay, and then it went ahead and snapped to the smaller size once we went past the medium. And there it goes. So we made our input form nicely laid out and responsive. And that's pretty much how you do it. We're going to keep doing this because as we're doing front end, we're going to keep working with layouts. But this is pretty much the main part of it. Getting familiar with the container. So what you want to get familiar with in that layout section is container, row, column. And the grid is 12. And those are the main things to know. And from there, you're just building upon that. And just by knowing those 3 simple things, this is what we were able to make. And it sizes nicely. It looks very nice compared to what our original default looked like. And that's it. Thanks for watching.